I am standing on the edge of Somariri at 15,000 feet in the Trans-Himalayas. The air is so thin, I have to fight for every breath, and the water is a pristine, impossible blue. I'm trying to have a profound thought. I'm trying to frame the perfect picture. I'm trying to be the climate evangelist. And then a gust of wind tears across the water and bites into my face. It burns, it hurts. And in that split second, the cold shocks the main character energy right out of me. The wind didn't care that I was a student. It didn't care that I recycled. It didn't care if I lived or died. The wind was simply indifferent. And that indifference stripped away the lie that I was raised with, the lie that this planet revolves around us. For my entire life, I have been told that to solve climate change, I need to be a leader, that I need to be a change maker, that if I just care enough, I can save the world. But I'm here to tell you that that advice is actually the problem. Geologists call our era the Anthropocene, or the age of humans. They say it's an era defined by our impact. But standing by that vast, cold expanse of water, I realized the truth, that the Anthropocene isn't defined by our intelligence. It is defined by our arrogance. We are suffering from a species-wide God complex. So today I want to explore a radical notion. Are we as humans failing to solve the climate crisis because we subconsciously believe we are above the planet, not of it? So what if climate action began not with hubris, but with humility? Now, I say this because I was one of the worst offenders. Before that trip to the Himalayas, I was exhausting. I had appointed myself the role of nature's human conscience, and I took that job a little too seriously. I was the straw police. I'd silently judge my friends for sipping iced teas from plastic straws. I turned family dinners into carbon audits. I remember walking past the trash cans at school, dropping a banana peel into the compost bin, and feeling a rush of genuine moral superiority. I honestly thought that because I felt guilty about the planet's dilemma, I was somehow better than the people who didn't. But standing by that lake, I didn't feel like a hero. I felt small. And it turns out that feeling is exactly what we need. Let me take you back to 1968. Apollo 8. 3 astronauts circling the moon on Christmas Eve, completing their 4th orbit, when suddenly, through the window, the Earth appears. A tiny, fragile ball of life, hanging in the void, shielded and nourished by a paper-thin atmosphere. One of them later described the experience as having experienced an overwhelming sense of awe and connectedness, accompanied by ecstasy. Think about that for a second. An astronaut, someone trained in engineering, physics, systems thinking, uses the word awe. Because what he felt wasn't just visual or intellectual, it was visceral. Frank White calls this the overview effect. And here's the thing, you don't need to take a trip with SpaceX to experience awe. When people are exposed to awe-inducing nature, even just looking up at a canopy in an ancient forest for 60 seconds, something shifts. The default mode network, the part of their brain that obsesses over self, over my schedule, my status, my anxiety, it goes quiet. It deactivates. Awe is one of the few emotions that lowers levels of cytokines, specifically interleukin 6, which is a marker of inflammation. It literally cools down your body's fight or flight response. And when the ego shrinks, space opens up. Space for connection, space for empathy. Psychologists call it the small self. And here is the paradox. When we feel big, we consume. But when we feel small, we connect. So what if every climate campaign began not with fear, but with wonder? Because fear paralyzes and awe mobilizes. So if awe is the biological antidote to arrogance, then why aren't we using it? Well, because even when we do feel small, our instinct is still to solve the problem the same way we solve a supply chain issue, with control. We view the earth as a warehouse, not a home. And so as global temperatures rise, our first instinct is geoengineering. We build massive treatment plants that drain energy and scrub the nitrates out of all our rivers. We're trying to engineer purity through brute force. But nature has a different engineer. A single adult oyster can filter up to 190 liters of water every single day. An oyster reef acts as a living kidney for the coastline, removing nitrogen and clarifying the water simply by breathing. Now we ignore the oyster because of a mindset called speciesism, the very unscientific belief that evolution is a ladder and we are at the top. But nature isn't a ladder, it's a web. And in a web, when you cut the strands beneath you to rise above, you don't climb, you fall. We talk about sucking carbon out of the air with direct air capture technology, machines that cost billions and use more energy than they actually save. Meanwhile, mangroves, which cover just 0.1% of the Earth's surface, can store up to 5 times more carbon in their tangled roots than any terrestrial forest. We can still save the planet, but only if we listen to nature the way we listen to family, with humility, not arrogance. The next thing that I want to talk about is something very important. We must stop trying to use resources with a lack of empathy for the planet. And that is one of the most important things we can do. But what does that actually look like? What does it mean to listen to nature? Allow me to give you an example. In 2005, the Indonesian island of Sirsi was hit by the same tsunami that devastated much of Southeast Asia. While over 230,000 people died across the region, on Sirsi, only 7 people were lost. Why? Because the island's indigenous community had an oral tradition called smong. That is S-M-O-N-G, smong. It was a kind of sung warning that was passed down through generations. It taught them that when the earth shakes and the water recedes, you run to the hills. No debate, no waiting for official warnings, you just run. The modern world, however, didn't have smog. We had seismographs and satellites and early warning systems that should have given us time. But thousands died anyway. The people of Sirsi survived because they were small enough to listen to the sea. Smog saved lives because it was awe-based knowledge, knowledge earned through humility, through listening to the land and respecting what came before. And yet, how often do we dismiss this kind of wisdom as primitive? You see, this is what speciesism looks like in practice. We don't just think we're above nature. We think we're above the people who still know how to live with it. And this is happening all over the world, even in Namma Bengaluru. In the 1960s, our city had over 1,400 lakes. And today, of the 200 that remain, most are polluted beyond recognition. What happened? Well, we began treating water like a resource to be managed and not a living system to be respected. We paved over lakes to build tech parks and apartment complexes and then acted shocked when the city flooded during the monsoons. We kept choosing control over humility, engineering over listening. And the tragedy is we're still doing it right now. Every time we prioritize a tunnel that benefits 12% of the population over aquifers. Every time we greenlight a flyover instead of funding flood barriers for vulnerable communities. But it doesn't have to be this way. The solutions we need already exist. That in the Bhutakola folk ceremonies and the ancient lake systems and the traditional knowledge that we've been too arrogant to take seriously. That in the oysters and the mangroves that have been doing this work for millennia. So here's my invitation to you, and I know it might sound strange. I'm not asking you to step up. I'm asking you to step down. Stop trying to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. Our planet has been around for 3.8 billion years. It has survived 5 mass extinctions, countless ice ages, asteroid impacts, and volcanic eruptions that blacked out the sun for decades. Chances are, it knows how to take care of itself, as long as we know how to get out of its way. Instead, go find your Somariri. Find a tree that is older than your country. Stand by a cold, deep ocean that scares you a little. Let the wind bite into your face until you realize that you are not the master of this story. You are just a character in it. Not because feeling small is comfortable. It's terrifying, actually. But because in that awe, you become humble enough to listen. You realize how small you are, and that is the moment you finally become big enough to protect our home. We don't need to be gods to save the planet. We just need to be humble enough to listen to it.